Hello and welcome to the Philippines. A couple of years ago, I did one or two videos about expat stories, and I've been here in the Philippines about 6 years, and I've gotten to know a lot of expats. I've heard a lot of stories different people have shared with me, and we can all learn from one another. Uh, uh, Stories about relationships, stories about starting businesses, running businesses, stories about dealing with immigration, the different agencies here, stories about the culture here, and some very good stories, stories about buying property uh, and renting, leases. Anyway, I've shared some of those a couple of years ago. I think I did one or two videos a couple of years ago, and my plan was to do that on a regular basis. But you know how things go. You get busy, and plans don't go quite as you had planned. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, I put out a shout to you all, and I said, email me some of your stories, some of your interesting stories, whether it be here, other Southeast Asia countries, travel arrangements, trying to get here or other places. Uh, One story that came in was about taking 6 months to try to get a refund on canceled flights. And I'm going to get into a couple of those stories, and I plan on doing this every 2 to 3 weeks. I will run some stories depending on how many come in here. And if you have an interesting story like that, um, in regards to travel, the Philippines, the culture, relationships, businesses, whatever, please send those in to me. My email. My email is amazingphilippinesdoitnow@gmail.com, and I will sort through those. I will, don't get real abusive or personal or name a lot of people. I can't. Certain limitations to what I can put up, of course. But anyway, that should be of interest to a lot. We can all learn from one another. Scams are another good one. I've encountered a few attempts to scam me. And anyway, looking forward to that and to sharing all of that with you folks as well. So I'm going to get into a couple of these stories, and then at the end, I've got some news that has changed. Travel news changes fast here, as it does in much of the world. And as a matter of fact, I've got a couple friends who went out of town went over to Mole Bowl on a trip, and they've got a vehicle. They drove over their personal vehicle over there, and of course, as they're traveling over, maybe a 3-hour trip on the west side of Cebu Island. The government came down with much more strict travel restrictions. And so we'll see if he ever gets back to Cebu City. I suspect he's got a business. He does a little bit of business here, so I suspect that will help him jump through any hoops that he has to as he encounters checkpoints. Number of different checkpoints being set up, and I'll get into more of the details that after I cover these stories. All right, the first story here is from a subscriber. Of course, hi Rod, I've commented on your channel quite a bit. My wife and I have a house in Sibonga. I believe that's a town south of Cebu City. We have moved her mother into. We usually come back every year for a month, and the plan is to retire there. One reason I'm so dedicated to watching your channel and others. We've been married 8 years. My first trip to Cebu City was 2012, so 2020 the plan was to come in May for a month. So when everything gave a clue that the world was locking down in February, I canceled the trip. It was an ordeal to get my airfare back, even though I had insurance. I had to fight for 6 months and finally got my free refund from Cheapo Air. I've learned my lesson on budget tickets and will just buy direct from airlines. With a catastrophe like this, everyone was canceling. Now, let me step in here a minute. that would be interesting to hear from many of you what your experience has been in with canceled flights. And I've heard some of those stories, canceled flights. Did you have travel insurance? Did the travel insurance come through? Did you book directly through the airlines? How long did it take to get your refunds? Are you still waiting? Did that airline go broke and you're not going to get anything back? Whatever that story might be. Anyway, back to the story. I had a buddy that was going to Negros Occidental, Bacolod, that April. I tried to talk him out of it as he is retired and is living off a fixed income. Let me interject here. That's the situation with many people where they're living on pretty tight budgets, and there's not a whole lot of room for emergencies. So anyway, he was on one of the last flights to come in and ended up locked down in Manila for 6 weeks. He had to rent a short-term condo, eventually getting back to Bacolod for 4 months to be locked down and not see any sights. He made it back, but now he lives from week to week selling stuff on the side, working on jobs to get back on his feet. In my case, other than not being able to see our family, enjoying that month away, it worked out as my father was diagnosed with cancer all through his body, and he was there every step of the way. He died May 4th. I would have had many regrets if I had not been there. One of my few good decisions. We are ready. We're just ready to come back and see the family, but it looks to me like Christmas of next year before the government over there will get it together, realize what Governor Gwen Garcia is trying to tell them. Locking down is starving people out. Anyway, that's my story. That's his story. And what he's talking about, Governor Gwen Garcia of Cebu Province, Cebu Island, has been saying for quite some time that she's one of the few that has been speaking up and talking about the damage done by the lockdowns. And she's saying, what have you accomplished? You haven't stopped the virus. But in the meantime, many people are dying. There's hunger. There's deaths because people are not going to the hospital. They're not going for other reasons. Anyway, that's a discussion that some of these media companies like to censor that discussion. So I'm not going to get into that discussion. All right, moving on to story number 2, Expat story number 2 here. Thank you, Rod, for your video updates about Cebu travel situation. Hope you will be interested in my recent experience. And I am a UK national, and I met my partner in Cebu in 2015. We have 2 daughters together, both born at Sacred Heart Hospital in Arguello, which is walking distance from Fuente Osmeña. I work in the UK, but we are spending 3 months of the year in Cebu. It was always my intention to move to Lapu-Lapu in a few years' time after selling my house here and finding somewhere in Marbago, which is an area of Mactan Island. Soon after the birth of our young daughter on March 2020, the UK government urged all UK nationals to return as soon as possible, so I went back early. It was a terrible shock coming back to the UK with empty shelves in the supermarkets, a full lockdown, and my work also finished. So I've been languishing here ever since, unable to return to Cebu and wishing I had ignored the return home instruction and stayed there with my family. Of course, there is very little work here, but my bills continue regardless. I now need a visa if I am to return, but the Philippine embassy here remains closed. To obtain the visa as a parent of Filipino children, I must show originals of their birth certificates, but of course they are in Labangan, and there's no easy way to safely, securely get those documents to me here in the UK. So as a result, my family and I have been separated for nearly 18 months. Now, with no end in sight for these restrictions, I have no idea when I will see my family again. I am thankful that my partner and children are living with her parents in Labangan, and the children are happy, healthy, and full of joy. And the interesting story, best of wishes to you. A good place to interject here is that if you were traveling anywhere, even across your own nation, your own country, your own region, the EU, the U.S., with different states with different requirements, and the fact that they can change those requirements, restrictions very quickly, it is a good idea to carry enough cash for emergencies, carry proper identifications that you might need, carry any documents, originals and or copies. A lot of times are not good enough. They're worthless. People want to see the originals, and not only that, they want to see them. What do you call them? They're properly stamped by an authority of some type, maybe the consulate or an embassy someplace. So it is best to have those documents with you, carry them with you, have extra copies with you, have photocopies, have the copies on your phone, all that sort of thing. Anyway, those are a couple of the stories. I've got a number of others that came in, and looking forward to additional stories as well. We'll get to in a week or two. We'll get to a little bit of news that I promised. Movement restrictions in place while Cebu City under MECQ. A little more restrictive, and those letters in the end, they kind of modified the community quarantines, and just really depends upon the area. Each barangay, each village, each local city, town, province can set its own rules. So it can get confusing trying to keep up with all this. But Cebu City is kind of an independent city on Cebu Island, has its own mayor in charge, and the mayor pretty much says what's going to happen here. Mandawi City, right next door, you've got Lapu-Lapu City over on Mactan Island. It's called the Tri-Cities area. Sometimes, but not always, do things, coordinate things. Oftentimes, there are a little bit different rules, so crossing from one city to the next city can be an issue. Anyway, let me get to this. This is dated August 15th, 2021. The mandatory stay-at-home order will be strictly enforced in Cebu City, while the city continues to be under modified enhanced community quarantine, the second most stringent quarantine level until the end of August. The acting mayor issued enforcement guidelines effective immediately until the end of the month, unless the classification is extended again. The EO states that the stay-at-home order applies to all except medical practitioners, hospital staff, emergency personnel, authorized national, local government officials, employees, drivers, and personnel of delivery vehicles carrying all types of cargoes, accredited media personnel. I don't think that includes me. Unfortunately, I don't have a media pass, although I do have an independent photographer's pass of some sort that I had in the U.S. Farmers, fishermen, agribusiness personnel, a person who seek medical attention or who already are admitted to a medical facility, provided they only have one companion or one helper. Employees of establishments, offices permitted to operate. It doesn't tell us who are. Probably BPOs, the business processing, the call centers, those types of things are allowed to open. Some of those actually house their employees on site. Some of those are operating out of hotels. They've leased hotel spaces, or they've put beds into their office spaces, and the people stay there. Let's drop down here a little bit. Quarantine points will be established to restrict movements of persons for essential and work-related purposes only. We went out yesterday. We purchased essential items. We went out and we got some food. I tend to buy large quantities when I go out. I buy enough for like I'll buy my avocado oil, my coconut oil, my extra virgin oils, different things I buy in bulk. Those things will last me several months actually. Um, we were able to buy a little bit of alcohol, and now I've seen that there's an alcohol ban in effect. All the bars are pretty much closed in this whole region, I believe. Um, anyway, they'll be checking for IDs, reason, questioning people. Why are you out? Ask parents to take full responsibility for keeping children. I've looked down from my viewpoint on my balcony. I can look down a few streets. Very little movement. And actually, for the last week and a half, there's been very, very little movement. People are not out because they had made more restrictions earlier. Anyway, the parental supervision household lockdown must be exercised by the parents. Heads coordinate and link with the barangay. The barangay is a village within the city, within the town. Assign a protocol enforcement marshal to ensure family members heed health protocols. Now, in my case, that would be me. I have my partner here and myself. So I am the enforcement marshal until and up to which point she tells me that, no, you're not. And at that point, she is the enforcement marshal. But to monitor movement of family members, prohibit gatherings, including outside one's immediate household, keep your house clean. Anyway, you can read through that if you like. A lot of stuff down there, and they brought in, I think, several hundred more, here, around 700 personnel from the Cebu City Police Office, the Regional Mobile Force Battalion. Whoops, not sure what happened there. And Probe, something that the Probe is an organization, a government organization, stands for Prevention, Restoration, Order, Beautification, and Enhancement Team, barangay captains, and a number of other people who will be out trying to enforce, and they will be out in a lot of the places that people might congregate, might want to go out and get some sun, might want to go out and get some exercise. People might want to go out and, for whatever reason, they're going to be out there policing those areas and try to enforce the people to go home, lock yourself in your house, don't have any. Anyway, stay in your house. Well, EO allows the operation of public-private laboratories conducting the PRC tests. The management owners are required to get exact verification details, so you can't just go there unless you have some authorization to do that. I don't know. It's sometimes the translation of these news stories loses something in the English translation, so I'm not sure exactly what those rules are. And then what you'll find is in the different areas, the different authorities interpret those differently. They may or may not have gotten the latest update yet. They may not have be aware. So if you're out, might be a good idea. If you're authorized, be sure you have the proper documents. And the next story here, vaccine hopping illegal and immoral. What is vaccine hopping? Has warned against vaccine hoppers or those who register for vaccination in different cities in order to get more than 2 vaccine doses. So first time I'd heard about that, but anyway. There's been a new rule that's come out in some areas about wearing air purifiers. They put them in offices. You can buy different size ones. You can wear one on the little chain around your neck, little UV type operation, and wearing of air purifier is additional burden to PUV drivers. And I think the DOH, Department of Health, has come out and said that it does not, for the most part, it does not do anything. Are required to use air purifiers, the PUV, the bus and jeepney drivers, to wear these air purifiers as an additional measure to curb. And I think the DOH has come out, Department of Health has come out and said there is no information that shows that down here it is not endorsing the use of necklace air purifiers that claim to kill bacteria or viruses or protect from. While these devices do not pose any harm, the DOH currently does not recommend using these devices for lack of evidence or of efficacy. Now, I've seen a couple of I've seen a number of editorials in newspapers here in the last couple of weeks as well. I believe, I may be wrong, I believe that the Philippines is the only country in the world, or almost the only country, that requires face shields in addition to face masks. Somebody, if you have other information, but these were editorials in the Philippine newspapers, and nobody seems to have come up with any information otherwise. Anyway, and the editorial stated that the couple of studies that were used to justify face shields were questionable studies. That's what the editorial said. I'm just reporting what the editorial said in a couple of these newspapers. Anyway, that is the Sun Star is one of many newspapers online that you can get news from, and you can go up here and hit the different areas, and each one kind of gets a different slant on the news. Anyway, that famous quote from so many years ago, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And, it's important to take the precautions, especially the older people with comorbidities. It is important to be careful, take the precautions. There is information online about different ways to help protect yourself. There are a number of different doctors giving out different information, and some of that is being censored, so I'm not going to get into that discussion anymore. I think there are, it's a religion to some people, and there are, exercise, getting sun, getting vitamin D from the sun, a number of ways, getting your vitamin C's and your different things. You can exercising, a little exercise. If you have a lot of comorbidities, be very careful. Take the precautions, obviously. Anyway, here's hoping that many countries will do what Singapore has said they're going to do. They have stated that in the coming month or two, they are going to start treating this virus similar to influenza and other flus, and just understand that we have to live with it. And just like the influenza, which kills so many people every year. There are bad years, there are less bad years, but we're going to have to deal with it. Life is going to have to go on. And anyway, stay safe, stay healthy, keep the faith, guys and girls, and we'll see you next time.